Hello and welcome to Wednesday Debate Live with Taghreed Hussein here on Nile TV International. Well, tonight we'll be highlighting more than one important topic, talking about the ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon, and also possible reconstruction amid the U.S.-Israel-led war on Iran, between the challenges that lie ahead and also facts. As we know, women in Gaza and Lebanon are bearing a disproportionate share of the suffering in the ongoing conflict in those areas, with over 38,000 women and girls killed in Gaza between October 2023 and December 2025 alone. And amidst this unprecedented sense of violence, they have shifted from traditional roles to become the primary heads of households or caregivers for the wounded, or even active frontline humanitarian responders, while enduring the suffering, the starvation, and also the forced displacement. The humanitarian needs also in the Middle East that are growing by the day throughout the escalation of the violence that would force different families to flee their homes and push the communities deeper into crises. The war has definitely reshaped the lives of families and left many households headed by women after the loss of husbands and loss of relatives. These women now carry the full weight of caregiving, income, as well as survival. So tonight we'll be highlighting the responsibilities, the priorities of the different groups, as well as the influence of gender roles and power dynamics in shaping the experiences, also the coping strategies and needs of the impacted population, with our guest, Mrs. Simone Salem, UN Gender Advisor, but right after having a look at the top stories of the day. Earlier in the day, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had received the president of Hiroshima University, Michiru Uchiu, on Wednesday. In the meeting, the president emphasized Egypt's commitment to expanding cooperation with Japan to modernize curricula and enhance educational quality. The president said such target can be achieved through integrating advanced technologies as AI, artificial intelligence, to prepare the students for the demands of the labor market. For his part, Mr. Uchiu hailed the ongoing collaboration of the university with the government. The Japanese official praised Egyptian efforts to reform the educational system and reaffirmed the university's dedication to support the state's priorities for modernizing specific methodologies. The meeting was at Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli and Minister of Education Mohammed Abdel Latif. It centered on distinguished bilateral relations and the long-standing partnership that binds Egypt and Japan in the field of basic and higher education. And highlighting that important headline, we're honored to be joined by Professor Dr. Wael Badawi, Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the Egyptian-Russian University. Dr. Badawi, thank you so much for joining us on the debate live tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with the debate.
Thank you. Dr. Well, we are talking about this important headline, the meeting between His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the President of Hiroshima University, and Egypt's commitment, of course, to expanding cooperation with Japan in order to modernize the curricula, to enhance educational quality. How do you see integrating AI in the curricula today in order to prepare our students for the labor market?
It's an excellent question, and to start with, Egypt has a long history collaborating with Japanese institutions, and this is in the Egyptian University, Egyptian Japanese University for Science and Technology, which is for short EJUST. And this university have been acknowledged worldwide because of their different programs. Egypt also have in the undergraduate and in the basic education the Japanese schools, and all of these have been able to enhance the science, technology, mathematics for our students and our graduates. Yes. So getting exposure to the artificial intelligence in the Japanese context, it matches the diversification of our government, because our government is looking to diversify the source of information and source of knowledge. So we have experience with the European, with the North American, and the Japanese will come as part of diversifying the source of information. So we do have a holistic, integrated approach for our education system. We have to remember also that Japan is very focused on the marriage between academic and the industry, so their academic, industry, science, technology parks, where they actually develop hardware and software which meet the industrial needs. So it's a very practical education techniques, very practical educations, and this is what we need. We don't want more theoretical approaches to artificial intelligence or to science and technology.
Yes, definitely. While we're talking about AI, we're talking definitely about modernizing scientific methodologies, and this is very important. The students today are before a curricula that would help them understand the demands of the labor market, and this is what really Egypt is really keen on, to invest in the human potential, to invest in our students today for their future. The future is in artificial intelligence. So the educational system, and how do you see, Dr. Wael, modernizing those scientific methodologies?
To modernize scientific technologies and to integrate artificial intelligence, it's a question have been posed in so many venues. One of the serious issues we have to talk about that our students right now are using AI tools to solve some questions. What we are looking for in the future is experiences from overseas, where how to integrate the use of artificial intelligence and its advantage into the education system. So how to transform courses, so the course part of it will be given and taken by artificial intelligence tools, and how the students can critique and judge the outcome of the artificial intelligence. We do have lots of projects in Egypt and lots of funded projects in Egypt. However, if we are exposed or we exchange information in this domain with a foreign country, in particularly leading countries in education, science and technology, such as the Japanese environment, I believe this will positively impact our students and our lifestyle. We have to understand that artificial intelligence is still fairly new. It's a technology about 3 to 5 years old only. And how to take advantage so it does not kill or it does not reduce the human invention and the innovation, while it's used as advanced calculators to enhance the outcome of the graduate. This is where we are looking now, and this is where we need lots of experience exchange between different nations to understand how to position it well in our curriculum. So reforming the curriculum to integrate artificial intelligence, it's nowadays a serious question. It has to be answered.
Definitely. I thank you so much, Dr. Wael Badawi, who is the professor of AI at the Egyptian-Russian University, for joining us and discussing this important headline. Another important headline came as His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had received a cable of congratulations from Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli on Wednesday on the occasion that marks Labor Day. In his cable, the Prime Minister expressed his best wishes to the President on behalf of the Cabinet. His Excellency, the Prime Minister lauded the dedication of Egypt's workforce across all production sectors, praying for the nation's continued prosperity and the well-being of its loyal workers. He further reaffirmed the government's commitment to advancing national development goals, guided by the President's vision and the steadfast resolve of the Egyptian people. And on the second segment, we'll be discussing Gaza, Lebanon. What lies ahead for Gaza and Lebanon after Iran war remains the question. This report, and we'll be back.
As fragile ceasefires are in place between the United States and Iran and between Israel and Lebanon, a question is vexing Palestinians in Gaza. Will this de-escalation on other fronts allow Israel escalate its military assaults on Gaza or force it to adopt a more cautious path? Since April 8th, the U.S. and Iran have maintained a tense ceasefire after weeks of U.S.-Israeli bombing of Iran and Tehran's retaliatory strikes on Israel, as well as infrastructure and U.S. assets in the Middle East. But Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz and a U.S. blockade on Iranian ports loom large over the region, even as mediator Pakistan tries to bring the two rivals back to the negotiating table. U.S. President Donald Trump last week said Israel and Lebanon had agreed to extend their ceasefire by 3 weeks after talks between them were held at the White House to reach a long-term deal. The Israel-Lebanon talks excluded Hezbollah as near-daily violations of the truce by Israel continue across southern Lebanon, where Israeli forces have established a yellow line demarcating the territory they are occupying, like they have done in Gaza. Since March the 2nd, when the latest escalation in fighting between the Israeli military and Hezbollah broke out, more than 2,500 people have been killed in Lebanon and more than 1 million displaced. Meanwhile, the Israeli government has indicated its readiness to continue the military operations in Gaza amid a relative calm on other regional fronts, raising fears among Palestinians of the all-out genocidal war returning to haunt them. The possibility of Israel resuming its assaults on Gaza is seen by some as an option for Israel, as guns fall relatively silent on other fronts, but others see a renewed war on Gaza as a pressure tactic by Israel to influence the ongoing negotiations with Iran and Lebanon. There is a hidden crisis among women in conflict. While bombs and bullets make headlines, for millions of women and girls, the trauma of war, displacement and repression is taking a devastating toll on their mental health. Women and children stand in a queue outdoors at a displacement shelter, waiting in line in a courtyard. Lebanon conflict drives mental health crisis for displaced women. We hear, see and feel pain constantly. Escalating conflict in Lebanon has forced hundreds of thousands of women and girls to flee their homes, and women are on the front lines of the response. The escalation in Lebanon, now in its 6 weeks, has stoked fears across the country and led to a mass displacement crisis, with women and girls disproportionately affected. UN Women estimates that 1/4 of all women and girls across the country have been displaced since the 2nd of March. Since the escalation of the conflict, an estimated average of 16,750 women and girls have been forced to flee their homes each day due to widespread violence and evacuation orders, and girls from southern Lebanon severely impacted. Many are staying in informal arrangements and overcrowded shelters while taking care of children and the elderly. Here comes the question, the suffering. Why women and children in Gaza are losing their ability to speak, while the number of amputees set to rise in Gaza and Lebanon amid NGO warns.
We're back, and we're honored always to have with us Mrs. Simone Salem, who is UN Gender Advisor. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Salem. And as we have followed in the report that shows, of course, the devastation that has happened in Gaza and Lebanon, what is needed. Many challenges, of course, lie ahead, and of course, the segments that are really suffering, women and children. So they are at the heart of the crisis. How do you see the challenges before the reconstruction work in Gaza and Lebanon in the first place?
First, thank you so much, David, for having me with you. Well, this is really, as the report had said, the most devastating crisis that Lebanon and Gaza had seen since the beginning of the war. The displacement of 1/3 of the population is massive, right? Yes. And I think the challenge is that hope has to be part of the response. And I think right now although the resilience of the Lebanese people is usually something that is remarkable, and we always, like speak about it, I think this time around the hope is becoming a bit of a problem, that they relive that hope back and bring it back with the work. But I see that what would be the challenge is really that the demolishing has really been horrific in terms of 90% of the infrastructure, let's say in Gaza, has been wiped out, which means all of the sanitation, all of the sewage systems. You're talking about massive reconstruction. In Lebanon, it's more about how the displaced could be going back home and what kind of experience would they have mentally to be able to understand that their houses are no more. Right? And some of those people that have been displaced, it's not their first displacement, right? Yes. Some people have been displaced for 6 and 7 times. Yes. So it's quite a problem.
Yeah, it is, of course, and I guess that through the work of the United Nations, we're addressing the trauma in which those women are actually, what they are actually passing through. But before talking about the psychological effect and how to deal with this sense of trauma concerning women and children, we've seen more than one important aspect concerning the leading efforts in the region, Egypt's leading efforts in Gaza and Lebanon in order to coordinate and avoid any sense of duplication among the regional actors to reach a ceasefire and to rebuild efforts.
Yes. Of course, Egypt plays a very strong role. I mean, its proximity to Gaza is very important in sending all the needs. Of course, opening the Rafah Strait just for medical evacuations. It's been done in a very professional and humanitarian and timely manner. Also, whatever in terms of shelter and food has been provided. Egypt will play a very, very strong role in the future with the reconstruction of Gaza, as we know, because we do have all the know-how, as we know. Egypt has the manpower that could support, whether it's in terms of the construction facilities, whether in the electricity and fuel, also in the medical system and the healthcare workers. We have a lot of experience, and I think people are also very happy to support. I think also the cumulative love of the Egyptian population to support countries in crisis is going to be showing the true face of the Egyptian let's say, generosity and support.
Yes, definitely. And in addition, of course, as we all know, the Rafah border crossing,
of course,
that has always been opening, enabling reconstruction, enabling the sense of aid and equipment reaching the needy, and also medical evacuations. This has also been a very important point. Mrs. Salem, well, you've worked closely in crisis areas with women in crisis areas and also with children. Tell me more about this trauma as you see it, and what's the approach for a way out?
You know, we always say the deepest wound is the wound that the doctor cannot see. And that's exactly what we have in those times of crisis. Actually, I have been to Lebanon in 2006 when there was an attack from Israel, and I supported some of the camps in Beirut when there was also another crisis with displacement. And I can tell you from experience that it's really very hard for you to be losing not just your home, right? You're talking about losing your people, your family, your neighbors, your support system. You're on your own. And not everybody is able to address that in the same way. So the trauma is hard, and that's why we say with the UN work that the first thing we need to work on when we speak about women and supporting shelters and all of that is that we need to have the right psychosocial support. Because that's the beginning of the healing, right? We cannot expect them to go back to their normal lives and rebuild and reconstruct their country with that initial wound there. And especially with kids. Children are the most hit, but children are resilient, by the way. So that's also something we need to be cognizant of, as well as women. When it comes to war zones, we are surprised how they are able to hold themselves and their families, because there is nothing else to do. We have to be there and we have to work. And we have to be the ones taking care of their children. So it's a kind of trauma that they will have to deal with after shock. And that's where the humanitarian support and aid needs to come in.
Yes, definitely. Women in Gaza are facing severe, of course, health conditions, and this actually adds to the sense of suffering. And at the same time, we have the collapse of medical infrastructure. How do you deal with such crises closely as UN staff while you are dealing with those women?
I think the first thing we need to do is protection, right? That's the first thing that we think about, is how do we ensure that these women and girls are protected? Protected from everything, protected in the shelters itself. They are well lit, because sometimes the violence, you know, it should not be the aftermath of war is violence, but what happens is that the war creates these opportunities for violence to grow. So we definitely try to minimize the possibilities of violence that would be definitely women and particularly girls would be subjected to. And then the second thing is trying to see the needs on the ground. You know, sometimes countries and donors who have money to support and humanitarian aid, they come and say, oh, we are going to provide them with this and this and that. But this might not be the needs of the people from on the ground. So what the other thing after protection is, we need to make sure that we are providing them with exactly what they need. If it's money, sometimes it's not cash that they want. Maybe it's food, and the right kind of food. And that kind of support has to come from consultations with the women and the people on the ground. As well as, I think what we also would be very careful to do is making sure that we send the story out. We tell the story so the world can see. This is not just a crisis.
Their voice should be loud.
Definitely. And women have that power. They are able to tell the story. You know, if you see the documentaries, I'm very proud to say that Lebanon, for example, it's amazing work done by the communities and the civil society. It's not the government that's helping out, because the government is also short-handed. But it's amazing to see how the communities are supporting one another. And somebody was saying Lebanon is المواطن مش البلد. Lebanon هي المواطن.
The citizen first.
The citizen is first. So, and the citizen is the one that makes the country in a way. So this resilience is we need to show it. And we need to tell the story, and so people can understand what kind of violations are happening and that it needs to stop. And this is why I think this time round, and I hope it's the end, that ceasefire continues, because people now around the world are understanding what kind of atrocities are happening and how they need to all, you know, work together to stop it.
Yes, definitely. Well, the wars definitely are really considered to be very much devastating on the lives of women, of children, of girls specifically, as you have mentioned. And this sense of trauma is not only physically, but also socially and economically. And you've seen such stories. Which of those stories you think was so touching when you worked closely in Lebanon?
You know, one child, I used to work with children, so one child was talking to me in a very nonchalant way. You know, I woke up in the morning and my father was not there, my brother was not there, and I saw the leg of my sister there, and the way he was speaking to me, it's like he was watching a movie. So that was very touching to me. Because I understand that the damage is severe, and they are not understanding that damage. Another story was from a mother. She was actually a grandmother, and she was telling me, this is the second time, it's a déjà vu. I've seen that with my son in 1985, and now I'm living it with my grandson. So what kind of life is really about a generation that had seen nothing but fear, crisis, and still they are resilient, and that's what I say is the silver lining in many of the war stories, is that it never stops there. You see how they are. Can I say sometimes that some of those conflicts, you can shift the gender equality and the gender roles, for example. So right now, if you see women in those conflict zones, what do? They are the ones negotiating peace talks. They are the ones at running checkpoints. They are the ones mobilizing resources and aids. So there is some sort of a change that we can see after the war that puts women and gender equality into again in the right place, and then we can follow up from that when we are rebuilding the country.
Yes, definitely. Following up on rebuilding those countries, and Egypt's role is very much evident, and despite of the trauma, despite of the atrocities, but still the humanitarian aid to support our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Lebanon continues. Let's watch.
The Egyptian Red Crescent said its 185th Zad al-Izza from Egypt to Gaza convoy carried tens of thousands of food parcels, medical supplies and fuel to Gaza on Wednesday as humanitarian needs deepen and ongoing Israeli attacks continue despite a ceasefire. The convoy included more than 105,000 food parcels, 1,500 tons of flour, 915 tons of medical and relief supplies and 1,000 tons of fuel, in addition to 11,305 pieces of clothing, over 14,915 blankets and 3,315 tarpaulins. The organization said it was preparing to receive a new group of wounded Palestinians for treatment in Egypt, the 38th such batch since the outbreak of Israel's genocidal war on the Gaza Strip in October 2023. At the Rafah crossing, the ERC said it continued to facilitate the transfer of injured and sick Palestinians and their companions while providing meals, clothing, personal care items and return kits for those heading back to Gaza. It added that the total aid sent from Egypt since the start of the war had exceeded 900,000 tons, supported by more than 65,000 volunteers. Aid flows have declined in recent months due to Israeli violations of the ceasefire terms, resulting in persistent shortages of food, fuel and medical supplies. The ceasefire framework called for the entry of around 600 trucks per day, but only a fraction of that has been reaching the enclave, contributing to rising prices and deepening shortages. Local officials warn that restrictions on the entry of fuel and equipment are worsening an already severe crisis. Food supplies are also falling far short of needs. Gaza requires roughly 450 tons of bread per day, but only about 200 tons are currently available, according to local officials, leaving large segments of the population without reliable access to stable food. Less than half of Gaza's food requirements are being met, while the vast majority of the population now depends on aid as its primary food source. Displaced families living in tents face particularly harsh conditions with restricted access to gas and basic services. The worsening shortages have raised warnings of a renewed risk of famine, as aid groups say current delivery levels remain insufficient to meet the needs of the Strip's population. The deliveries come as the Israeli occupation army continues attacks on Gaza in violation of the October ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, brokered by Cairo, Doha, Ankara and Washington.
We're back and we're still discussing more concerning humanitarian relief. Mrs. Salem, definitely as we've seen in the report, the importance of humanitarian relief provided in those crisis areas. And alongside the government efforts, the NGOs and the civil society play a very important role as well, hand in hand with the governmental efforts to provide humanitarian relief.
Well, for us in the UN, we say that our right arm are the non-governmental organizations.
Right.
And definitely they are the ones that are able to provide most services. They are able to go deep into the country, into the places where other partners cannot go. So, and they are trusted, right? So the communities trust them, and they can open up, to them. They
in
tell
what
them,
way can they make the difference? They reach, as you've said, areas that no other parties would do. So this is a plus in itself.
Definitely, definitely. It's a plus. They understand, first of all, they have
the nature.
The nature, of course. Yeah, and they have the know-how because of their experience in working and access and experience. And also they are, some of those are community-led. When we say community-led, so they are supporting For example, you might have migrants and refugees who are supporting those organizations, right? So from a refugee to a refugee, so you know what matters to you.
You know the plight, you know the suffering, you know in what way can you be also a healer.
Exactly. So I think this is important for us to continue, and this is why we in the UN, we prioritize funding the communities and the civil society more than even the governments, because especially in humanitarian crisis. Also the infrastructure, sometimes you go to the organizations that are well placed strategically in the camps, in like the Red Cross, Red Crescent, also Médecins Sans Frontières. There are some organizations that we definitely have to work with, because they are the ones, like you said, they have access. And also they work with women better. They have women.
They understand the psychology.
Exactly, and children, and they support in different ways, with art, with culture, with giving. Sometimes we say the basic needs, which is food, as we know now, the shortage of food, and even water. I know that fathers would walk, I know of stories of fathers who would walk for kilometers to get drinking water, and then they come back and it's not even enough for the family. So the basic needs are definitely needed, but the communities can also provide what is more needed, which is the hope, the good energy, the vibes that we can continue to work together. It's me and you in this together. So which is basically very important, as well as food and sanitation and everything else.
Yes.
That community aspect is quite important.
Very important, because understanding the nature is always a plus. Having the sense of experience in dealing with those candidates in plight areas is another plus. How far can international actors actually help in alleviate the sense of suffering? The role of the United Nations, we've talked about the UN, other important bodies like the EU, the Gulf countries. In what way can such regional players also contribute to alleviate the plight?
I think it's not a matter of how can, it's a matter of they should. So it's about understanding the problem, the crisis, and also it's already been done. Like if you see 10 years ago, or let's say 7 years ago, when we in the UN were providing support to humanitarian crisis, there was no gender markers in that work, right? We did try as much as possible to include a gender component in the work. Now it's not existent. You cannot support or fund a project if it does not have a very clear gender component and transformative action. So definitely the UN and the international aid will have a very, very strong role to play, but also to understand the reality on the ground, and that it's not just relieving a country, but how to rebuild it, making sure that women and girls are intact, right? That they are able to be taking leadership roles later on when the country is coming out. So it's a very intricate way of supporting, but we just want to make sure that we are not losing what has already been gained in gender equality with the war and the aftermath. That's very important for us.
What sort of challenges, Mrs. Salem, do you find in gender challenges do you find in those sensitive areas, the plight or the crisis areas that need crisis management teams? What sort of challenges?
Well, I see the first challenge is the violence. That is the easiest thing that men can do, or it comes naturally with the war. Violence in all sorts of forms. The second thing I would say is the maternal health mortality and the rates of reproductive health issues that women particularly face in crisis. We have the highest rate of maternal mortality in crisis situation, and with this current war it's very high. No medical equipment that is ready, and the children, for example. One of the main challenges we face is that you have a generation that has not been into school, right? And girls are likely to miss schools in humanitarian settings than boys, for the reason that they are the ones who take care of the household with the mothers if they survive. That plus, as I said, the trauma, the unseen wounds that are in those young minds and in those mothers who are really taking the brunt of the whole work, it's very difficult to live with. So those are the challenges that I think we need to be working together to make sure that we have ways. And we do have good, you know, unfortunately, I have to say, the world has seen a lot of crises, right? And we learn throughout. So we were just discussing this in one of the meetings we had on a humanitarian crisis, is how do we take the data that we know, how do we take the evidence that we know of things that worked and bring it along, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time we have a crisis. We make sure that we don't do the same mistakes again when we're supporting especially women and girls.
Yes. Talking about reconstruction efforts, maybe one of the main challenges to the reconstruction efforts come this sense of sustainability. We always want the reconstruction efforts to be sustainable, the humanitarian relief efforts to be sustainable. How can we achieve that?
I think the first thing that you need to invest in the people themselves. That's the basic of sustainability, because those are the people that will make sure the country works. So for us, it's making sure the capacity of the communities is kept. When you have all the restructuring efforts, whether it's building infrastructure, going back to building building hospitals, universities, you make sure that the people from the country are part of all of that, and they are capacitated to lead. So, and we realized women, for example, when they are in leadership positions, they are able to bring up other women and put them in the forefront of all the work that needs to be done. So that's the first thing we do. We really invest in the people and make sure that they are able to take their country forward. We have seen so many examples, and Egypt has been doing this great with, I think we had this 2 million health workers in Africa that we supported, so they could be able to provide that health care to their countries without having to go back to the know-how. The know-how has to be part of the community itself and not coming from outside.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Simone Salem, for this valuable input, especially when it comes from the eyes of a UN Gender Advisor who has been working closely in crisis management areas and helping alleviate the plight of our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Lebanon. I thank you so much, Mrs. Simone Salem, the UN Gender Advisor, for being with us on the debate live tonight.
Thank you so much, Tahrir. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. And I thank you, dear viewers, for joining us. That was Wednesday Debate Live, and I'm Tahrir Hussein, thanking you all for watching.